Hello and welcome to the Samsung Your Industry Focus webinar for construction. My name's Graeme and I head up the enterprise segment here at Samsung UK. We're going to show the agenda in a couple of minutes, and if anybody would like to ask any questions as we go through the session today, please do just type them into the Q&A box that you'll see on screen. What business has not been fundamentally impacted by the tumultuous events of the last 18 months? From the immediate shutdown of retail to the urgent requirement of workers to work from home, organisations of all sizes have had to adapt and be flexible in ways never seen before. This also created the opportunity for businesses to re-examine their purpose and their operational models as they work out how to adapt to this new world. The acceleration of digital transformation has also created huge opportunity as businesses have become ever more mobile-centric, while still having to address concerns of security and data protection. Here at Samsung, we seek to inspire the world with our innovative technologies, products and design that enrich people's lives, like the incredible fold devices transforming the mobile industry and providing the first real innovation in a very long time. Whether that be our new computing devices, which tie together both IT and mobility to provide an incredible user experience, as well as a whole range of other solutions to be covered in the session today. Samsung believe that this technology should be available for businesses of all sizes, whether that be small businesses right the way through to multinational corporations. On screen, you can see the agenda for today, and you'll hear about real-life customer stories and solutions. At this point, I'd like to hand over to our partner Pescado to introduce themselves.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Justin Carl. I'm the Client Services Director here at Pescado. In case you don't know who we are, we're one of the country's largest independent telecoms and IT brokers. Something we've been doing with ever increasing success over the last 15 years. Our role is really to act as a bringer together of technologies and offer a bit of thought leadership to our clients. And we'll talk a little bit later about how we've been doing that quite successfully. Looking forward to the discussion this afternoon. I'd like to hand over to Graeme and Jarrod now, who are going to talk us through the next stages.
Great, thanks Justin, and good afternoon everybody. So what I'd like to take the opportunity to do now is just to introduce Jarrod Crouch. So Jarrod is one of the enterprise sales managers here at Samsung. And we're going to kick off, Jarrod, just by asking you for some thoughts, please, in terms of what you've seen over the last 12, 18 months as the major challenges facing the construction sector.
Thanks, Graeme. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So, yeah, I'm happy just to talk through a few of the challenges and issues that we see in construction, FM, utilities, and then later on we can open that up into sort of a discussion around what we can do in that space to help. So I think the perennial issue really for construction is the large deployed workforce, countrywide sites all over the place with thousands and thousands of workers, which isn't matched by the resource within the IT team. So there's rarely an on-site IT team. IT teams tend to be quite stretched and have to really fight hard to sort of service their end users. So that's certainly something we can talk about a bit later on. The second piece, which is really quite recent, is the rise in accreditation that's required when undertaking any kind of public sector or government work. So recently, with the rise of Cyber Essentials, the requirement to be accredited is much greater than it used to be, say 18 months ago. The third piece is looking at devices that are suitable for the purpose, and that could be suitable from a design perspective, i.e., are they suitable for working on site? It could be a connectivity perspective, or it could even be about the longevity of the device. So we can cover that later as well. Ensuring efficient communications on site. So what's the best way for the workers on the site to be able to get in touch with each other? It's a challenge, especially with connectivity on site. And then the rise of the more complex workflow. So tasks becoming more difficult, workflows becoming more challenging, and just how on-site workers can access a point of expertise when perhaps that person that they need to talk to or get instruction from isn't on the site, or is somewhere else on the site and not available at that time. So they're the sort of the 4 or 5 things, Graeme, that perhaps we can talk about a bit later.
Yeah, perfect. Brilliant. Thanks, Jarrod. And Justin, from your perspective at Pescado, what have you seen in the last year and a half within construction, and how would you summarise those into some broad themes?
I think it's not just the advent of COVID that's had an impact. I think, as Jarrod's already pointed out, in the construction industry, I guess historically, it's probably been one of the least digitised sectors that we've worked in terms of, as Jarrod mentioned, you'll have large sites, multi-sites across the country, and there's rarely any on-site IT support or resource, or no office at all, and no connectivity. And part of what we've had to really think about probably more so than ever in recent months, is how we can bridge those gaps of making sure they've got the right network connectivity, that actually construction can continue and major projects are brought to fruition with increasing stress and pressure on expenditure. So it's very much about making things very much more better value at the same time as actually providing a digital transformation journey for them at the same time. So we've had to try and bridge all of those gaps and trying to make sure that clients get what they need to in these straitened times, and ensure that the projects come to fruition effectively, but with technology that they can carry on with into the future. So again, Jarrod's mentioned it about making sure that it's not just for now, but they've got long-term plans in place and devices that are going to last through what are often challenging environments that they're working in.
And who tends to be the kind of key decision makers within construction businesses?
Depends on the size and scale of the business that we're working with. Some of our larger clients, then we will often have a CTO, but often they're quite detached from the day-to-day operation. It's often the operational leads or the senior project managers, the guys on the ground, where he or she is running a major project and is looking for tools to enhance their job. I think so. It's generally through the IT teams that we access this, but I think it's very much then becomes an operational partnership, if you like, to make sure that we're working very closely with the guys who are on the tools effectively.
And you mentioned that a lot of this was a lot of these trends, I guess, were impacting the sector before COVID. What do you think the impact of COVID was, back in March, April last year, when construction was still actually having to go on, but clearly operating under very different conditions?
Well, yeah, and it was those instant changing conditions. It was about the number of people that was on site. People that were previously on site suddenly had to become remote workers, but the construction sites still had to continue and reach their project goals. So that it led to some interesting challenges to people, where you'd have people on site, and then all of a sudden you got project managers that were forced to work at home effectively because they wanted to limit resource around, and how you're actually getting communication between those different parts seamlessly, whereas you might have somebody on site with eyes on something on a day-to-day basis. That was no longer possible. So we had to make sure, we had to move quite quickly with a number of clients to make sure that they had the right tools to do that effectively.
And I guess a question for both of you: what was the underlying kind of attitudes or the openness to consider different ways of doing things within the sector? There's a wry smile there, Justin.
I guess it depends on which person in the construction industry you were talking to. If there's chaps in the financial side of things, they were potentially loath to invest where they needed to. The project managers were often very open-minded. I was going to talk about one project we worked on where we brought together drones, 5G, the network operators directly themselves, and the hardware manufacturers such as Samsung, to actually bring a project together at the same time. So, drones have always been part and parcel for the last few years on construction sites. If any of you had a roof done at your house, the local roofer will come along and put a drone up. And on some of the larger sites, then they are absolutely critical. If you're building a 50-story building in the middle of London, then actually HD drone footage is essential. And previously what was happening is, when you had people on site, it might well be that the drone pilot would finish at the end of the day. He'd go back down, bring the drone down, they'd download the information off the drone onto a laptop. Then the project manager would review it, decide whether the drone pilot needed to go back up again, or if it was the end of the day, the file would be sent back to head office for further analysis. And if something was missing, then the whole process would have to start again. That was not only costly, but it was also, in COVID times, quite inefficient in the way they wanted to do things, because all of a sudden the project manager was no longer on site. And we work quite closely with this project management company and with one of the network providers to make sure that where we're utilising 5G coverage, so actually they upgraded the drones, HD footage was taken directly from the drones, real-time downloads were going back to a laptop or a tablet on site, and it was instantly transmitted back to head office, which could be 100 miles down the road. And actually, the drone pilots were often remote themselves. They weren't even necessarily working on site. And again, we're using network coverage and good hardware to make sure actually the project manager will real time be able to go, no, actually, I need you to go back up to the 49th floor and zoom in, and get really close to something and get instant downloads of this stuff. And it actually became a huge transformation in the way they were doing things. And they've subsequently rolled it out across the rest of the world where the networks are able to support it. So it's been quite an interesting project. Our role was just to bring together the devices, the project management team, the pilots, because they were the key in driving all of this, because they were the guys that were often frustrated in terms of having to spend huge amounts of time going back and forth, getting the information across. So it's been quite an interesting project, but it's one of those areas where technology and COVID and moving things forward all came together at the same time.
Brilliant. And in terms of Pescado as a business, Justin, just talk to us a little bit just about where your, I guess, credentials and experience in the construction sector, where does that come from?
It's born out. It's more by luck than judgment in some respects. But we it's not a vertical that we say we are the world's experts in. But we manage a lot of small to medium sized enterprises, but we manage quite a lot of national house builders now. We have probably 3 or 4 of the leading architect businesses in the UK on our books, and we have a couple of these project management businesses that I've described. And actually, it's quite interesting when you talk to these clients. They're all interrelated. They all know one another, and actually, it becomes a really nice mechanism where actually I might be talking to the finance director of a leading architecture firm in the middle of London, who actually uses a certain project management business that happens to be on our books at the same time. And they're actually doing a project for a major house builder based in East Anglia that builds, everything in the east of England. And actually, these 3 things often come together. So it's actually through referral and through, and that sort of level of knowledge means that myself and particularly my account managers are able to build up a decent degree of knowledge in that sector and actually start offering, as I described, a little bit of thought leadership about how we can join the dots between all those different parties. And making sure that architects are thinking about network infrastructure when they put their building in place, and that the project management team are thinking about some of the technology that exists out there that can facilitate them starting and managing and completing a project. So it's been quite an interesting journey in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Okay, so hopefully that's given us a bit of a view of the some of the insights and the background to the sector. Jarrod, if I go back to you, where from a Samsung point of view do you think Samsung can help with customers of all different sizes within the construction space?
So I think the first point we've both mentioned is that construction companies especially have hugely remote workforces with generally small IT resource, and how best to service those remote workers is somewhere we can really lend a hand. I think an example of that is one of the main challenges is the simple deployment of devices. So if we look at deploying large scale numbers of could be phones, could be laptops, could be PCs, is how do they get those devices working into the end user's hands with the minimum of fuss? So for instance, at the moment, what we typically see is either the IT admins will take those devices in-house, build them, sideload them where necessary, put the MDM on, load an image, and then send those devices out to end users, which is really time consuming and really expensive. Or the other way they may do it is that the devices just get sent straight to the end user with a big instruction list which says, right, this is the 55-step instruction list, please get on and get these devices working, and that's not ideal either, because that leads to a large number of errors, or that just doesn't happen, and the device is then not compliant and is not being used as it should do. And one of the ways we can help with that, for instance, is we have a product called Knox Mobile Enrollment, and all that simply does is the first time that device is powered on, it will look to the cloud, see that it's a corporate-owned device, and pull down and install that company's MDM client. It doesn't matter which MDM client it is. And it locks it into that cycle. So the first time it turns on, it skips all the Google startup screens. It will skip all the Samsung startup screens. It will load into that enrollment cycle. And then from there, once the MDM's downloaded, we can even use credential pass-through, so the end user doesn't have to do anything. And then the MDM can take over. So then it can start doing its thing. It can start loading apps. It can start installing the mail clients, any whitelisting and blacklisting of networks or of websites, whatever it might be. And just that one simple tool, actually, which is free of charge from Samsung, and we can help you get up and running with it as well, can just take out a really big, difficult first step that really sometimes challenges sort of the IT in-house IT teams, especially when it comes to construction.
Brilliant, thank you. And in terms of the hardware itself, you've touched a couple of times on it. What is Samsung doing in the construction space that makes these devices relevant and appropriate?
So there's a couple of different points to draw from that, I guess. There's suitable for purpose from an actual physical device point of view. So will it still work if you drop it in a puddle? There's a fit for purpose from a connectivity point of view, and a fit for purpose from a longevity point of view. So a third of those is from a design point of view. So we have rugged phones and rugged tablets, which are IP68 and they're mil spec. So will be really suitable for whichever construction type environment it is, whether it's a site or a road or wherever it may be. So they actually would work underwater for half an hour. So that's the level of the IP rating that they have. They also have glove touch. So in this COVID world, where we're increasingly having to wear gloves, or just because they're outside and it's cold, they'll still work when the user's wearing gloves. They'll still work when the device is wet. So with traditional devices, even with a rugged case, if they get wet, that they won't quite function right, whereas these will continue to function perfectly when they're wet. So from a rugged credentials point of view, we've got that covered. Connectivity is really important. So quite often you can't get traditional broadband into these sites because they might be temporary or they may be greenfield. And with the rise of 5G, having 5G enabled devices is really important. We're seeing rapid site deployment packages now where sites can be quickly up and running with 5G routers. And to complement that, we've now got a range of 5G devices, and it's not just at the top end of the device handset scale. It's at entry level and at midpoint as well. So if you've got a 5G rapid site deployment solution in place, then we've got the devices that go with that, so you can take best advantage of it. And as I mentioned, that's across the range. And then finally, from a longevity point of view, there's nothing worse than going through the process of specifying a device, getting it on the company portal, getting it approved, and then it going end of life. So with a range of our devices, which we're calling Enterprise Edition, we'll guarantee that those devices are in market for a minimum of 2 years from global launch, and we can share roadmaps with you so you know when they're going to go end of life and what will be taking over from them as well. And just by the by, as well as with Enterprise Edition, you also we'll guarantee 4 years as a minimum of patching and 3 years warranty.
And how important is that within construction?
Construction is, as we've mentioned before, relatively low margin business, and making the decision about devices which are going to be available for a decent period of time and a usable price point that can stay in the portfolio for 3 or 4 years is really important.
Brilliant. All right, good. Thanks, Jarrod. Justin, back to you. So from a Pescado point of view, you talked earlier about trying to bring some of that solution together for the customer. Can you just give me an example of a way that you've done that over the last 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, just picking up on a couple of points that Jarrod was making there. So we took on a major house builder probably 17, 18 months ago, just as COVID was hitting, and they actually had a clear path of where they wanted to get to. And of course, cost was everything. I think Jarrod's just alluded to it. You call it low margin, we call it economies of scale. I think is probably a nice way of putting it. But they wanted to make sure that they were getting really the best value out of their portfolio moving forward. And thankfully, this kind of coincided with the launch of the enterprise range. The 3-year warranties is kind of a really key tool for these, because with the best will in the world in most construction sites, tech products aren't treated with the care and attention that those holding the purse strings would necessarily like. So things like launching things like the X cover, which is on 5G, that's a robust device, has been actually a really essential tool. So it's just a question of us of making sure that we're joining the dots on that. Again, the perception was that these things were going to be out of their price range, that it was not going to be something that was going to be suitable for them, the on-site engineers. And the introduction actually, showed it on the short video there before, but Dex has been an absolutely brilliant tool for a lot of the on-site guys, so they're not carting huge amounts of kit around with them, and because the kit they're plugging into is robust and COVID secure, as well as, more importantly, from a building perspective, probably that they're not going to get wrecked the moment it gets wet or dusty out there, has made a real difference to them, to the way they were previously operating. And for them, it sounds like really simple stuff from our perspective, but for them, it made an absolute material difference to what they were doing. They were on-site form, were able to order materials more effectively. They were able to do it in real time. They weren't relying. They moved away from huge amounts of paper-based systems. So for them, going from a very basic operation that was turning over hundreds of millions of pounds, they've gone through a real digital transformation, just aided and abetted by having some really good, solid, robust kit. And guess what? It sounds almost scripted, but Jarrod, we've not spoken about this before. But at the same time, because they were restricting what they wanted those devices to do, they all went out Knox enabled straight out of the box. So it was plug and play from their point of view. They switched on and everything fired up, and off they went. And they just had the key tools on there that they wanted to work with. So bringing together things with long shelf lives, with robustness, with the software on it that they needed, meant that the guys on the tools were able to just get on and do what they needed to really, really effectively. But from a project management point of view, the company were able to hugely speed up their processes and drive a massive amount of efficiency out of some of their larger projects. So it's been a real, it's forced us to do things much more efficiently as COVID. So if there's any positives that come out of it, this is really one of them, that actually it's changed the way that they've operated, and the advice we're able to give them about how they deploy these things and things they can do, stuff that they never really thought of because it hadn't been absolutely necessary before, but now it is.
Brilliant, thank you. And a question either of you can pick up on. You mentioned Dex there, Justin.
Yeah.
Could you, just for anybody who's not familiar with it, either of you would like to just sort of expand a little bit and just explain what Samsung Dex is?
I think Jarrod would probably give a better explanation than I can, but I think from an outline point of view, it effectively turns my handheld Samsung device into my laptop, my computer, my desktop in one, and all I need to do is connect it to another screen, another device to transmit information or to use it effectively as my only tool that I need on site in order to not just act as a phone, but act as a computer. Jarrod, would you like to explain that a little bit further?
I don't think I can explain it any better, Justin. I think that's really good. So, yeah, I mean, essentially turning your handheld phone or a tablet into a desktop device. So connecting it via either wirelessly or with a USB-C cable into a screen, use it in conjunction with a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse, and essentially it renders up into what looks like a desktop environment, like a PC environment. And that's it is still an Android environment, but if you're using Office 365, Teams, that's fine because that's all native on the device anyway. And then if you need to get back into the true Windows environment, for instance, if you've got a suite of apps or a particular program that will only work on Microsoft, then you can use something like Windows Virtual Desktop or Citrix or VMware and remote back into that environment. So you can even have the true Windows environment. And the only tool you need is a phone or a laptop and a cable.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you for that. And Justin, in terms of other things that Pescado can do for customers in this space, what else would you highlight?
So we're not just a supplier of mobile devices. We're a network provider. We're an IT services company. So a lot of our clients will outsource all their IT services to us. Again, that's become essential over the last 16 months, where on-site support has not been something that customers can provide for themselves anymore. So we provide remote IT support, desktop support, server support, moving stuff into the cloud, but at the same token, we're also a major network provider. So we're pretty agnostic across these things. We are not tied to any particular network. We're not tied to any particular fixed line provider either. It's just a question about getting the right value and the right product and service in place. The glue that holds all of these things together is often the handset that sits at the end of it. Yeah. Because all that does is receiving the ones and noughts. However that digital signal is received, we just make sure that they've got the right device, the right bits of ones and noughts coming down to them at the right speed, and that's our job, to go out and do that. It's I often describe it as a bit like we're almost like the mortgage brokers of the IT world. We go out and look at the marketplace and come back and make the recommendation. Look, we've looked at 10,000 products. Here's the 3 we've narrowed it down to, and here's the right solution for you. And that's the kind of way we always position ourselves. And I think our customers value that, because we're taking that part of the decision making away from them. That a lot of CTOs have often said to me in the past, it's great someone presenting me with 27 different solutions. I want someone to tell me what the right one is, please.
Yeah,
and that's kind of where we step in and bridge the gap for them.
Brilliant. Just a quick reminder for anybody on the call, if they'd like to ask a question, if you just type it into the Q&A box on screen, and we can ask Justin and Jarrod for their thoughts. We've had a question in, and that question is around 5G. So the question is, from a 5G perspective, where do we see the benefits of 5G for the construction sector? And this is coming from somebody who's a medium-sized business.
So I'd say there's a couple of areas. One we've mentioned, which is in the rapid site deploy area. So areas where there isn't at the moment any ability to put in any fixed line to that site. So getting a site up and running with instant communication. The technology of fast site deploy has been around a while, but it started with 3G, moved to 4G, and now with 5G, it makes a massive difference in terms of speed of connectivity, number of devices that could be connected, and latency. So that's one area, and the other area I'd say is in the Internet of Things. So having lots and lots of things all reporting back at the same time, whether that's a piece of plant on site, whether that's a person, whether that's a device. Being able to have all those pieces of equipment and people reporting back at the same time with almost zero latency can really help in terms of Internet of Things and automation of processes.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jarrod. Justin?
You stole my thunder a little bit there, but I think, well, the 2 things I wrote down was latency and IoT. So, but I think, certainly, and as it rolls out, and to be fair, let's be quite honest about it, the rollout of 5G has slowed up dramatically. This isn't just to do with COVID. This is to do with everything to do with Huawei and political decisions being made behind the scenes. But certainly, we're seeing it with increasing rapidity rolling out in metropolitan areas in particular, and their latency becomes really important. So if you've got a new site, and talking about specifically around construction, and actually if there is no hardwired connectivity in place there, and actually having good 5G, and it's in a very, very busy area in central London or central Manchester, then actually it's becoming a really essential tool now. And it's not necessarily about the speed, which is fantastic, but it is that ability to have huge amounts of devices connected at the same time and being able to do what they need to do effectively. In terms of IoT, yes, as these sites build out, and you're building out a construction site, and you are putting in lots of machine-to-machine SIMs into that new premises, whether it be in the lifts or in the security systems or in the parking areas or whatever it might be, then again, it's really facilitating that into making sure that real-time data is getting back to where it needs to instantly. So it has made it has started to make a real difference. I think we're yet to see the real transformation that it's going to bring yet, but that's just due to the speed or the lack of it in terms of deployment from the networks at the moment, and that's not really their fault. They are having to provide a whole new core network provision under the skin. So there's an awful lot of work to do with the guys over the next few years, but I think it really will make a huge difference right across the piece, and it'll free up 4G spectrum for those other areas that as well are not reliant upon it. So there's a lot of advantages to everybody.
Brilliant, thank you. And for those people joining the call who aren't clear on how Pescado and Samsung work together, would one of you like just to kind of talk about how that works? And therefore, if there is somebody on the call who isn't sure if they should be talking to Pescado, should they talk to Samsung? Who are they going to call?
Shall I pick that one up initially, Jarrod?
Sure.
So we're a direct Samsung partner, and that, in sense, means we not only benefit from direct training and product innovation often before it's launched, and we know what's coming down the tracks. It's around the high levels of support and training we receive directly from Samsung, so all of our sales guys, support guys, and account management team are accredited and up to speed with what's going on in the hardware world. And it also just means that we're able to ensure that it's, as a broker, we want to make sure that we've got the right solution in place, not the only thing that's in our briefcase, figuratively speaking. And it means we've just got really good choices. It's not about let's move this product because we've got plenty of them in the warehouse. As I mentioned, enterprise devices, when they came on stream, and we were able to talk in advance with customers about what the requirements might be, knowing that what was going to come down the tracks was going to be available to them in a month or two down the line. And that's hugely advantageous for us as a broker, to make sure we're keeping ahead of the game a little bit, but also knowing we've got absolutely that, platinum level of support directly from the manufacturer. And it's a real kudos for us as a reseller to be able to have that relationship. But hopefully it's great for Samsung at the same time, because we're in the muck and bullets with the clients, and we can feedback about what's important for you guys as you develop new products and services.
And I guess I'd add to that here at Samsung, we engage with end customers as direct customers. We don't fulfill anything directly. We work hand in glove with our partners like Pescado. But in terms of things like, there's a lot of resource within the Samsung world, as you can imagine, and working with Pescado, we can bring that resource into the end customer, whether that's technical support, roadmap, device trials, or just our view on the world and what we're seeing in terms of trends and new technology. So yeah, we work hand in glove, really.
Brilliant, excellent, thank you for that. And Jarrod, I just wanted to ask a question. If there are people here who are working with specific third-party apps, specific to the construction industry, how does that work with Samsung technology? How does that process work, and how would it interface into Pescado?
So I guess one way I can answer that is sort of as an example. So as I mentioned, we've got a lot of resource here at Samsung. So one of the things we do really well is have a partners team where we go out and try and find the best products, apps, services that sit well within the Samsung world and within the environment and the vertical market. So a good example of that is what we've seen recently in what I call sort of remote point of knowledge and the connected worker. So as for instance, on site now, we see increasingly complex workflows. We see more difficult tasks that perhaps the guy on the tools isn't always qualified to solve on his own first time. And we see that over the past 18 months. And actually went out to some partners, and we found one called JoinPad, where that connected worker can, using a mobile device, a tablet or a phone, can share his screen with that remote point of knowledge, who could be anywhere in the world. And that point of knowledge can call up logs, can call up service books or manuals. They can annotate directly onto the screen. So for instance, big tick here, big cross there, don't touch this wire, but touch this one. And because of our augmented reality chipset in our devices, it means that in real time, that the point of knowledge can see exactly what the guy on the tools is seeing as well. Combining that with artificial intelligence has meant that parts, components, for instance, can automatically be recognized and labeled. And we went out to the market and found a company called JoinPad, who actually have this as an app already. So it's not something Samsung's made, but we've gone out with the app partner there, found this really, really great app, which is really useful in the construction industry, and sort of gone to market with them. And the slightly higher cost of entry version of that is, rather than using a tablet or a phone, there's a company called Realware who manufacture what they call head-worn tablets. So that's a boom which sits on a hard hat or a cap, and you look through it, and it's got a microphone on it as well. So it gives the same experience as JoinPad, in as much as the end user can, or the remote point of knowledge can see what the end user's seeing. but it gives the guy on the tools both hands free to work at the same time. So it's a slightly higher cost of entry, but does give that benefit of being able to work, talk, and see what's happening at the same time. And again, we went out to market and found these guys, and now we work with them as partners. And actually, if we were working with Pescado in this instance, the three of us would get together, talk about which customers this would be suitable for, and perhaps have some sort of joint plan to go and speak to them about it.
Brilliant. And I guess that then, Justin, reinforces your position as kind of trusted advisor that you were talking about earlier.
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting what Jarrod was talking about. I know one of those pieces of software, but the other one's quite interesting. We'll have a conversation later in a bit more detail. But it's been able to offer that thought leadership. Yes, there's an awful lot of organisation pushing their product out to people. And in this day and age, you can't be doing that. What you'd be going out is being a trusted partner, and they'll talk to us and saying, this is our problem. And I think we've probably got a solution. If we haven't got that solution, we'll certainly put you in touch with somebody that has. And the partnership with Samsung enables us to do that with not just with huge amounts of credibility for us, but knowing we've got absolutely the most credible partner out there in terms of the size and scale of what you guys can offer. And without sounding too po-faced over it, the close account management we have between the two companies has been fantastic, because it enables us to have that resource alongside us, sat in front of customers saying, this is the art of the possible. And that helps with that brokerage part, as I was describing a little bit earlier.
Brilliant. Okay, well, we've answered the questions that have come in. So, Justin, is there anything more that you wanted to kind of add today to the conversation discussion?
No, I just really thank you guys for the opportunity to come and talk about this. It's we're experts in many things. I think we'd always describe ourselves as we're a bit like general practitioners. We know a huge amount about great many things, but actually when you need a specialist to be able to bring a Jarrod along or someone from Samsung along to come and actually get into the detail of it, bring that specialist along, I think is hugely important in this day and age, and I think it's massively reassuring for our clients and prospects. And I think it's vital that we continue to be able to develop these opportunities, because the world of construction, I guess, it's been much maligned for not being at the technological forefront. Actually, it is in very many respects, and it's driving a lot of change. And I think it's change that can be driven out into many other industry sectors. So, let's out of adversity, let's look at the opportunities.
Brilliant. Thanks, Justin. Jarrod, anything from you?
I think just to add that, please feel free to reach out to us. We've covered some of the examples today, but there's some other great examples with things around our partnership with Microsoft and turning your work phone into a push-to-talk walkie-talkie device for on-site use, which is really strong, especially in construction. It's a brilliant tool. We mentioned DEX, using that, pushing compute power into the cloud and using the DEX environment to virtualize. It's just the front end of that, if you know what I mean. So just to improve those workflows. So we're here to talk about all those things, and we can go into more detail if you'd like to get in touch.
Brilliant. And on that note, so both Justin and Jarrod have said they're happy to share their contact details for anybody who does want a follow-up conversation or email. So if you want to get in touch with Justin, it's justin.carl, CARL, @pescado.co.uk. The phone number is 07919 556 896. And for Jarrod, it's j.crouch @samsung.com. And the phone number is 07823 520 205. So thank you very much indeed today to both Justin and to Jarrod. We hope you found that interesting and potentially sparks off some future conversations, and enjoy the rest of your day. Many thanks.
Thanks, everyone.